is the appointed time, and we have a quorum. So let's call the meeting to order. If you want to speak, please use the electronic system. So item 1, confirmation of minutes. LC paper number CB bracket 1455/18-19. These are the minutes of the meeting dated the 23rd of October last year. Any objection? So let's confirm the minutes. Thank you. Item 2. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There are no particular comments raised. So please consider the items for discussion at the next meeting. Sorry. Item 3. Items for discussion at the next meeting. Please refer to LC paper number CB bracket 1456/1819 bracket 01. Another paper is LC paper number CB bracket 1456/1819 bracket 02. The next meeting will be held on the 26th of February, and the proposed items for discussions are as follows. The date is the 26th of February, Tuesday. 4 items for discussion. Progress report on infrastructure at North Apron area of Kai Tak Airport and Kai Tak Development Plan. Second, proposed creation of 2 permanent posts of chief electrical and mechanical engineers in the EMSD. Third item, technical amendments to 2 pieces of subsidiary legislation made under the Buildings Ordinance. And the fourth item is important works on stormwater drainage systems at Pok Fu Lam, Ong Ping, and Yuen Long, and measures to deal with the flooding in rural areas. Any views on these 4 proposed items? Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I have no particular comment on the 4 proposed items. The task force on land supply has submitted its report, and it's been some time, and there have been a number of suggestions raised in the community. So at the electrical, we will be having a meeting to invite the task force to explain the report to us, and then we can also give our views. Any views on Mr. Edward Lau's suggestion? Mr. Andrew Wang, I agree. Thank you. So I will arrange for a special meeting to do that, because we already get 4 items for the next meeting, which will take us to around 6 p.m. So that won't be sufficient time to discuss Mr. Lau's suggestion. So we will have a special meeting to do that. All right. If there is no further view, so that's the 4 items for the next meeting. Item 4, Kutong North and Fanling North and new development areas. Funding applications for main works, detailed design, and special ex-gratia cash allowance. So we'll now invite the administration team to join us. And you can refer to papers, LC paper number CB bracket 1456/1819 bracket 03. Another paper is bracket 04 paper. If members would like to speak, please press the request to speak button. A number of members have already pressed the button. And this is about a funding application. So members, in accordance with ROP 83A, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matters discussed, you must disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. Each member will be given 4 minutes. And first, I will like to introduce the administration officials. including Secretary for Development Mr. Michael Wong, JP, Permanent Secretary Planning and Lands Ms. Bernadette Lin, JP, Mr. Lam Sai Hong, JP, and we also from the Environment Bureau, Mr. Chechin Wan, Undersecretary, and Mr. Elvis Au, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, as Ms. Doris Ho Huiling, DDS of Development Bureau, and Mr. Lai Chak Ho, Project Manager, North CEDD. So for the other members on the team, please refer to the list tabled in front of you. So I would now like to ask the Secretary to say something. Thank you, Chairman. The Tung North and Fanling North NTAs, we used to call it NTNE, are an important option under the medium long-term land supply options. The media sector that it will provide a big supply of land supply. So a total of 1,000 housing units, taking in 188,000 people will be accommodated, and a total of business employment jobs will totaling 40,000 will be provided. Since the planning of NTNE started several years ago, we spent a decade to consult, plan, and adjust our plan, and statutory procedures have been completed, and we have consulted many stakeholders and adjust the details, including adjusting the compensation and rehousing arrangement. I would like to thank the LegCo for passing the enhanced compensation mechanism last year. We believe that the whole package can strike a balance between promoting Hong Kong's interest in as a whole and protecting the interest of those affected. And we've now come to a critical stage of our development. So I'll now ask Ms. Doris Ho to take us through a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Well, let me share some main figures for these two NDAs. There will be two phases of development. As pointed out by the Secretary, there will be 71,800 units to be built, 70% are public housing units, and in these two new NDAs, there will also be commercial floor area totaling around 890,000 square meters, and we believe that some 40,000 jobs will be created. And in promoting the development of these two NAs, we have to resume private lots, and we have to invoke the Land Resumption Ordinance to do that. For the two phases of development, we'll be resuming 180 hectares of private lots, including brownfield sites. And we have to clear 233 hectares of government land. The number of households affected total around 1,500, and the business undertakings affected number is 400 or so. Planned additional population and close to $190,000, and the infrastructure works will be completed by 2031 if we can start the works towards the latter half of 2019. Let's take a look at the Kutong NTA. This time, we would like to apply for funding for main works for first phase development and also detailed design for the remaining phase development. Let's look at this PPT. First phase involves the green and the purple parts. And the purple parts have to do with site formation, roads, cycle tracks, and service reservoirs, and drainage and sewage systems installation. Now, the green part is around 37 hectares, which is now the Long Valley wetland. In the first phase, we will work on the conservation of this area. We will be establishing the Long Valley Nature Park, and this is one of the requirements under the EIA, which is a mitigation measures for the ecology. And the remaining phase, second phase, is in yellow, and we are seeking the funding for the detailed design for this phase. Let's now take a look at Fanling NDA. Using the same color delineation in the previous slide, the purple part has to do with the first stage works, and it involves mainly site formation. It is to be noted that in the first phase works, we will be constructing the eastern section of the Fanling bypass, which is 4 kilometers long. This is a major road works for this NDA. We hope to have the NDA new population going through the Fanling bypass to go to Kowloon without going through the Fanling town center. And there is another project, the yellow part. Here, this is the Hong Apo police facilities, and the blue part is on the Shuk Wu Hui affluent polishing plant, where we'll elaborate in a moment. This plan shows the two NDAs together. The roadworks are shown here. In the first stage, we said that we would be constructing the eastern section of the Fanling bypass. It mainly aims at helping the new population in Fanling North to go to Kowloon without going through Fanling and Chengshui, and that can also try to divert certain traffic flow. Fanling North is near Chateau Kok and Man Kam To BCP, and the Fanling bypass will also be able to lead the vehicles coming from these BCPs to go to Kowloon without going through the Fanling. And we also have the Fanling Highway. We are concerned about that because there are two roundabouts which are often congested, including the Tai Tau Lang roundabout. In our second phase detailed design, we will also deal with the congestion at this roundabout. The preliminary thinking is that at Po Shuk Wu Road there will be a flyover, which is in the form of a bypass, so that the number of vehicles going to the roundabout will be reduced. And for Kai Lang roundabout, there is another study going on. Let's now talk about Long Valley Nature Park. As I said, this is one of the requirements under the EIA. This is a mitigation or compensatory measure. It takes up 37 hectares in area, and some 32 hectares of private lots have to be resumed for conservation. For this Long Valley Nature Park, there are a few functions. First, you can see from the PowerPoint, the blue part will be turned into a visitor center. There will be a bird hide, visitor facility, and so on. And the yellow part and the blue-green parts are wetland areas. And so the farming activities now there can continue, and agricultural rehabilitation is allowed.
The two NDAs are brand new, so we want to have some intelligent city features, environmental friendly features. We mentioned bicycle tracks, and we want to encourage walking. We also have intelligent street lighting, so on. Moving on to our timetable, we'd like to have LegCo's funding support by in the first half of the year, and if we get funding, then in the second half of 2019 we will start 3 phases of work. We have to have land resumption and clearance. This work will run from the second half of 2019 to the end of 2021. So as I said, phase 1 involves 400 households, 100 plus businesses. So in 2 years' time, we will have to settle those cases. We will also start first phase of infrastructure, and it will be completed by 2026. and then we will conduct detailed design for remaining phase. So the first lot of population will move in by 2023, and by 2024 we believe the design work for the remaining phase will be completed. And if we get funding from LegCo by 2023, then works for remaining phase, we can commence land resumption and clearance. So as I said just now, we will complete first phase infrastructure work by 2026, and we expect that by 2031 we will complete all the infrastructure works. There are two items that are related to the NDA. That is the police facilities at Gong Apo. So Gong Apo is not within the NDA. If you refer to the map, we have a dotted area, a dashed line. So we want to include all our police facilities there. We now have separate police facilities in Gudong North. There are 2 firing ranges and also a helipad. In Fanyun, that is not within the NDA. There are also some police training facilities for firearms and driving. So originally in Fanling North, we had set aside 2 pieces of land where we would take the facilities in Fanyun and relocate there. But we have identified a better solution. That is, all the police training facilities can be concentrated at Gong Apo. The benefits are, one of the benefits are, in Fanling North and Gudong North, it can release some land, and we can also release land in Fanyun. So in our remaining phase design stage, we will have 4 pieces of land that can be released, and we can examine the land use of that. So this is the Gong Apo site formation and engineering infrastructure. We need to widen the roads leading to Mangamdo. So the last item I wanted to talk about is the Sek Wuhui effluent polishing plant. The red rectangle, large and small rectangle, are the existing Sek Wuhui effluent plant. So we would like to use some more land, that is the blue rectangle. So we want to rebuild in situ the effluent plant, so it will expand the effluent capacity. It can almost double the capacity. So we want, it is currently a grade 2 environmental rating. We want to upgrade it to grade 3, the highest level of environmental processing. So this will be the new effluent polishing plant. That is the layout. It isn't much different from the existing layout. That is the largest piece of land in the middle, the largest treatment facility. One of the changes are they were handling sludge in that area. It was close to the civilian area, so in the new suggestion they will move it over here away from Seongsoihang, and they will build an administrative building there. Aside from that, the drainage DSD and water department, they want the facility to be accepted by the public, so they have considered sharing some facilities. So given the geographic location, it is where the 2 rivers converge, so they will have some footpaths open 24 hours, and in the administrative building they will also have some sitting out facilities that will be made available to the public. The administrative building They will also allow access to the roof so people can get a view of Longyun. To summarize, I want to say we would like feedback from a few funding applications, depending on the discussion. Our next step is to take items A to E, the 5 items. We want to submit that to PWSC and FC for consideration. Items A to D, we have illustrated. Item E is no stranger to you. Last July, we came to FC an application for ex-gratia payment. So legislators agreed that we would set aside this ex-gratia cash allowance application, and they had agreed. You had agreed to create an account, and we just now need to inject funds into that account. So aside from these 5 recommendations, PWSC is dealing with a Wudong Fanling North item, that is land resumption and other allowances. So this involves the private land resumption, the compensation to landowners, farmers, business owners, some ex-gratia payments. So the sum is being vetted by the PWSC. Chairman, that is my introduction. So we now have question time from our legislators. The first, Mr. Lam Tuk-ting. The speaking order will be Lam Tuk-ting, Lo Wai Kok, Zhang Chong Tai, Lau Kok Fun, Alice Mak, Andrew Wan, Gary Fan, Kok Ka Kei, Chan Ji-chun, Kenneth Lau, Tommy Zhang, Alvin Young, Ju Hoi Dik, Chan Hang Ban, Tony Jie. Mr. Lam Tuk-ting. Chairman, the development in Northeast plus Song Shui Fanling, Wang Hao San, and other public housing developments, there will be an extra 300,000 population in the Northern District. The current population is roughly 300,000, so the population will double. Currently, we have a lot of traffic congestion in the Northern District, whether it is within the district or traffic from Northern District all the way to downtown. It is very congested. Just now, the Secretary referred to Gai Lang, Dai Tao Lang, the roundabout. There are 2 bottlenecks there. That is a traffic black spot. We are aware the government is looking into that. So from the time they start a study till they complete work, it takes 8 years. So if there is a delay or extra time needed for the study, then it would add insult to injury. So could the government pledge that before the extra population moves into Northern District, your traffic studies can be complete? So whether it is traffic within a Northern District or traffic from Northern District to the rest of Hong Kong, you should complete your improvement works. And recently, we also have affected farmers say that the land resumption or relocation to other farms or farm rehabilitation, they say that the farmland isn't suitable and there are no living quarters. So could you meet their demands so they can cooperate with the government and complete the land resumption work so that we can start the NDA work as soon as possible? Thank you, Mr. Lam, for the question. Regarding infrastructure, the government has short-term, long-term, medium-term measures, so we can defer to CEDD. So in phase 1, aside from the Fanling bypass, we also have our road works. So as Mr. Lam said, in the planning schedule. For example, when we do roadworks, we also want to compress the work schedule. So we want to complete the work by 2023-24. The Fanling roundabout or bypass, it will take some 5 years to complete the bypass. So by 2024, that is our goal. We want to complete the works as soon as possible. So phase 1 is scheduled to be completed by 2026. We will arrange these to be completed as soon as possible. In our remaining phase, we mentioned we have both at Road, Bridge, and we also have the western section of the Fanling bypass. So if we get funding in 2023, we start works in 2024. So we expect the works to be completed within 5 years. So that means the remaining works for the 2 areas I mentioned, we should complete it by 2029. So given the population increase, we can meet the time frame. You can follow up your question in the second round. I'd like everybody to have an extra round. So you can answer that and forego your second round. Ms. Bernadette Lin. Well, the farmers' arrangement is important. So in phase 1, farmers that are affected, so aside from Longyu, because they can stay there, we have some 30 households affected, and recently we had discussed with the farmers. These 30 households in phase 1, if they need to leave their farmland, the majority of them will have to leave in the second half of 2020 and between 2021. So there are still some details that need to be ironed out. So what is the policy now? If farmers want to continue farming, the government has cash allowance to compensate their departure. But all along, the government has had farm rehabilitation work. In the past, we would identify private land for matching. On this occasion, in this NDA, we have introduced some government land. So farmers affected in phase 1, the affected land is about 4 hectares. The government land that we have identified is also roughly the same area. We are aware that there is some feedback that the location is remote or the facilities are not appropriate. The land we have identified is in Northern District. It's an agricultural area. Regarding facilities, in our upcoming discussions, there's still some time. The government is willing to do its best and provide infrastructure, and we'll try to coordinate these efforts.
As for living quarters, if any households who are affected by clearance policies will be under the same policy, and there can be means tested rehousing, and then we also grant subsidy. So in other words, agricultural farming and rehousing are subject to different arrangements. Now, as for farmers who prefer to live in the same place where they farm, now some farmers might have their living quarters on their farmland, and the government has tried to exercise discretion to allow them to build squatters on newly identified farmland. But if we are doing that on government land, we don't have a policy to have living quarters just on the agricultural land because we have limited supply. Mr. Lam, do you support the proposal submitted to BWSC? Yes, I support it. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, For Tung North and Fanling North NDAs, we have long waited for the main works to commence since the 70s. In the last century, we've been trying to develop new towns to house new population. We started with Sha Tin, but regrettably, if we talk about Tung and Changquano, they were developed during the British colonial areas. And in the past 20 years of the SARG government, there is no one new town built. We've just been discussed that for a long time, but it's always been castle in the air, and now we're finally seeing some concrete progress. So BPA supports this funding applications to be forwarded to the PWSC and the FC, and we must address the pressing need for land for building houses and other economic activities. The earlier the work start, the better. I have some follow-up questions. As shown in PPT page 2, well, 70% of the units to be built will be public housing. There is a keen demand for public housing, but then at the same time, there is also a great demand for private housing. So how do you plan to provide more private housing units? The government also said that there's sometimes a public-private partnership PPP approach is warranted for developing housing units. Would you be considering PPP in some sites at the NDAs? Another question is about brownfield site operations. On brownfield sites, many operations are going on supporting Hong Kong's economic development. There is storage yards for construction materials and other purposes. You must find land to reprovision for these operations. Secretary, thank you, Dr. Low, for your questions. Let's take on the private-public housing split. We are following the long-term housing strategy's recommendations. This year, we have adjusted it to 70 to 30 in terms of public and private housing ratio, because there is a need for housing from different strata of the society. We can do that at Tung North and Fanling North. Originally, it was a 60 plus to 30 plus, and then we took a look again, and we found that we can increase the density, development density. So for the extra 11,000 housing units to be built, they will all be public housing units. PPP. Now, in the policy address, the Chief Executive has asked the Development Bureau to embark on a land sharing pilot scheme. And we must come up with specific recommendations for discussion by the community. We have to be transparent, fair, and just in our approach, and we are working on that. For the 70,000 housing units, do they include housing units under PPP? No, not for the moment. But is there any room to do that further in the Tung North and Fanling North NDAs? That's subject to further study. In the development of NTAs, we will identify new sites for logistics and storage purposes. And in Hong Shui Kiu NTA, we've been able to identify 6 hectares for midstream operations. Basically, we give out cash compensation for brownfield size operations, but we try to also find land to reprovision these operations. Let me add, Chairman, it's not just about money. These operations support many other economic activities in Hong Kong. There is a need for them to operate. So just having cash compensation for them is not a solution. So when you get to the PWC and FC, please give us more details on how you're going to address the issue. Dr. Low, Do you support this proposal? Yes. As I said at the outset, BPA support this to be forwarded to PwC and FC. Dr. Chen Chung Tai, I have two main questions. If you look at the Kutung North and Fanling North NDAs, they will be developed in two phases. There are 45 houses affected in phase 1, 162 in phase 2. These residents are unwillingly accepting the proposal. They are willing to be relocated. But then you are asking them to, well, they are asking for in-situ rehousing. But then there is a time gap between the two phases. So residents are worried. Can in-situ rehousing really be done? The residents have built a community network, and the elderly have a sense of belonging to the place. And come the government for redeveloping the land, the families are the network is destroyed. So can the government tell us clearly the arrangements for the two phases, i.e. whether you can really do in situ rehousing? Permanent Secretary. For those, for the 400 or so houses affected in phase 1, the Lands Department has invited all the households to provide information to us. The aim is that once adequate information is provided and vetting is done, when we clear the land, they can go to the Po Shat Wu estate in the North District, which is accepted by the residents, and the timing can match that. But last year, when we came to the FC to talk about compensation and rehousing, we mentioned that if residents are willing to leave earlier, can they leave earlier and then be rehoused earlier as well. And after that, the Lands Department has also issued letters to residents affected by the remaining phase. We'll try to gauge their interest. And once we've got the number, then we will be able to take it up with the housing department to make the necessary arrangements. But for some households, we think that they are just affected by second phase, so they don't want to indicate their wish now. So we haven't received a lot of responses. So we would like to work harder and we appeal to residents to indicate their wish to us as early as possible, so that the entire community can be rehoused in the North District in existing housing estates or soon to be completed housing estates. So can I understand it to be that you are not denying residents of in situ rehousing? The question is whether the residents affected by the remaining phase are willing to indicate their wish. So this has to do with administrative arrangement. Do you have any figures to share with us? How many houses have indicated that they are willing to move out earlier? Can I ask Ms. Lee from the Land Department to respond? Thank you, Chairman. We have received letters from 191 households who are affected by the remaining phase, and they said that they are willing to move out earlier. So do you accept that answer, Dr. Chung? Do you accept the answer? So when they get to the PwC and FC, well, they can just tell us categorically that they can arrange for in situ rehousing. Then I will accept it, the proposal. Yes, they've already said so. What's left to be done is for the households to get registered before that can be arranged. Now we have 1,000 or so households which have not replied. So please follow up on the relative or the relevant response. You haven't decided whether to support it, yes? Yes. So can the government expedite the work? Because you are talking about a small ratio only, and members are very concerned about this. Well, let me give a brief response. The overall direction is that the sites for rehousing will not be too far from where they're living now. For the housing society, they have a housing estate at Patwa Road. We are just providing that facility. And also, we have asked the housing authority to help with providing accommodation. And if they choose the nearby housing estates, then they don't have to move another time. We respect the residents' wishes. Mr. Edward Lau, DAB supports the funding application. Hopefully, the works can commence as soon as possible. For the NT Northeast Development Area, we used to have 3 NDAs, now it's 2. In 2008, we started discussing this at the District Council. It's been 10 years on, and finally, you've come to seek funding to resume the land. In the past 10 years, NT Northeast, Fanling North, Kotong North residents are suffering. Every year, they've been thinking to themselves whether my land will be resumed, whether I should carry out repair and maintenance work to my own homes. So now we've got a clear message. The government is seeking funding to resume land. They will work on it. So I hope that you can speed up your work. It's not the question about whether you will resume land. What we should discuss today is what residents are most concerned is when my land will be resumed and when I can be rehoused. This is of utmost concern to residents. So I hope fellow members can support this application. We are most concerned about whether there is in situ rehousing. After we have given our views, the government has made certain changes. There used to be a number of phases. Now you've just divided up the works into the first phase and the remaining phase. Only 100 or so households out of 1,000 households have indicated their wishes. I have talked to the relevant government official for a number of times, and you have given a deadline to the households affected by the remaining phase to indicate their wish. So before the deadline, would you go to the districts to, at your own initiative, to ask them to indicate their intention or wish? And can you also undertake that for residents who have indicated their wish before the deadline, and that is they are willing to leave and hand over the house, they can be guaranteed in situ rehousing. They've been given a flat in Bo Shat Wu Estate. Given the land shortage in Hong Kong and the residents are willing to hand over their housing, how come that the remaining phase will only start in 2023 or 24? Should you seek funding earlier so that you can build the infrastructure earlier? You said that you would work on the infrastructure from 2019 and 2023, and that will be in population intake in 2023. You talk about 4 years later, a spade-ready site for HA. Well, you really can't build housing in 4 years on a spade-ready site. So can you really do it in 2023?
Traffic is very congested in Northern District, and we had to in the past rely on the Northern bypass. So in recent discussions that has dropped off the radar. Gudong where is Gudong Station? Where is the Northern Link? So could the government respond? Mr. Wong, we have to thank Mr. Lau and DAB support. We are willing to do more you recall you had wanted us to take those measures. Could we allow for flexibility? We are willing to do that. We can communicate with the affected households, but on the other hand, if we have more flexibility, if our works cannot commence, but for various reasons they only want to relocate later, we cannot force them to relocate. Just now Mr. Lau asked whether we can bring forward the works. We might not have a lot of room. Why do we have phase 1 and subsequent phases? Just now Mr. Lam Jukting asked a very good question. Our infrastructure has to be in place before people can move in. So if you look at the NDA, we have already compressed the work as much as possible. We are willing to do more, but we don't see much room for further compression. So Wudong Station will be built. So the whole Northern Link timetable, that is being handled by Transport Housing Bureau, but Gudong Station will be built first. But what about moving in by 2023? Is that feasible? Because we're already in 2019 now. Secretary, could you respond? Regarding the traffic arrangement, I don't think I can answer on behalf of THB. So perhaps you can have THB respond in writing later after the meeting. Miss Alice MAK. I have 3 questions. First, about time. I'm not satisfied with this timetable. You see 2019 is phase 1. So this NDA does not start in 2019 when we have a preliminary stage. From day 1 when we had the plan, which year was that? We need people to know that it has taken so many years and it will run to 2031 before we have a number of public housing units, and compare that to the existing queue. So if in 2024 we will start the remaining works, so can we accelerate the pace? You can see how many public housing units can be provided during this period. So first of all, I'd like the Secretary to amend this schedule. Our start time is not 2019, including your previous funding application that was 5 years ago and nothing happened in the interim. You need to include that too. So given such a long period and we have some 100,000 public housing units, I think that progress is very slow. So Secretary, could you step up the remaining phases? We don't want it to drag on so long. So even from 2019 to 2031, we're talking 10 plus years for the public housing units. And this morning we had a housing crisis meeting. So how can we be accountable to people living in housing that is not suitable for living? So when we first started discussion about the NDA, you have to indicate which year we started these discussions. My second question is about the old age home in Sekjailang. So what arrangements do you have for a seamless interface? And if you don't have time, you can provide a response later after the meeting. Regarding the Sakwohoi sewage treatment, the effluent plant is very expensive. Why is it so expensive? 3 questions. Well, first of all, if we first started discussion in 1998, 21 years ago, of course there was a break in the talks. So when did we look at it seriously? 2008, 11 years ago. And if you recall the town planning, they had heard deputations for some 41 days, and there was a lot of controversy. We can give you a more detailed schedule, timetable. Could we compress the works? Originally, we had 6 phases, and now we have 2 phases. As I responded to Mrs. Lau Guofan, we might not have a lot of room to compress. Everything is moving like clockwork. We need to have infrastructure before people can move in. So I can promise we will do our best. Regarding Dill's Corner, some of the elderly, we would like them to stay in Dill's Corner. They are familiar with that. We would like to find accommodation for them in other old age homes. We do have a task force looking into that, and the progress is acceptable. The third question, perhaps, let me respond later or by writing. Ms. Mak, do you support this going to PWSC? We will support it, and we want them to accelerate it. Well, 2008, so we're talking about 20 odd years ago. So we could reclaim land in that period. Mr. Andrew Wan, I agree with my colleagues and their observations. So after overcoming numerous obstacles, it looks like we have a decent number of public housing units, and some 70% of it is going to be public housing. So first question is, we know that there are different types of public housing. So if we allocate according to needs, we have PRH, and we also have subsidized housing for sale. There wasn't a response just now, but I'd like to follow up. Could we step up the construction? I'm also concerned about Dill's Corner. Aside from the seamless interaction, because I've talked with the elderly, a lot of them want the existing operator to continue the operation. So are there any measures that the THB has looked into, so to have some seamless integration, so the 16 operators, the majority of them can continue to serve the elderly? So after they relocate to a new location, there can be a seamless handover. A lot of elderly, when they move to a new location, there is a large mortality rate when they have different carers. They're in a new location, it leads to mortality. So this is just a suggestion. Since it's so hard that we can have extra compensation for relocation, we have more households willing to interact with you. So I would like a more generous package for in-place, in situ relocation. So each household is different. They have their own difficulties. So aside from the Policy Bureau, can we have some assistance from SWD so they can receive the maximum support within the policy framework? So this is of public interest. So could Secretary respond? Well, the first question, the public housing within the district, how much is for rent, how much is for sale? We don't have the figures right now, but if you look at the macro level, so in the 10-year housing policy, we have 70% public housing. So it's also a 70-30 ratio. 70% is for rent. So could you take on board my suggestion? Could we have the majority of it being public housing? The Dill's Corner, we have been working with the labor and welfare. Well, the situation Mr. Wan described is correct. Labor and welfare are aware of it. Mr. Wan is familiar with the situation. if there is a new facility and a new piece of land, there is a public tender. Now, given the special circumstances, we also have special considerations, and we will still have a tender exercise, but if you are the original operator in Dale's Corner and you've been doing a good job, there will be a suitable adjustment in the tender exercise. So the old age homes will only be demolished next year, so there's time for a follow-up. I still have other questions before I decide. Well, Mr. Gary Fan, the Hong Kong people will not forget how disruptive and controversial the Northeast redevelopment was. So the pro-establishment, when this was, they endorsed the plan when Mr. Ng Sing was chairman of FC. So for such a large development, the public housing ratio was very low. So I had first proposed that we needed to resume Fanling Golf Course as an alternative. And today we see Mr. Eddie Chu has a temporary motion. It's about the same topic, but the government is turning a blind eye. Do we have any room for increasing the ratio of public housing? The second question we have is about traffic. We don't have transport department. We don't have THB. So when people move in, they need to commute. You have to recall that in the Railway Strategy 2014, we wanted a Northern Link. And last year, the MTR CEO said that they had made a proposal to the government, and Mr. Frank Chan said that the government is conducting an assessment regarding Northern Link, and the government will conduct consultation as soon as possible. So why, in this document, there is no mention of any rail infrastructure? Isn't the government promoting that MTR or railway is the backbone of transport system? So why don't we have any description or follow-up regarding railway network? There is a communication. I think when you asked a specific question, I said I had to check with the Transport Housing Bureau. Well, the Northern Link was mentioned in 2014. The Gudong station will be built first, but if you want a specific timetable, I need to consult with THB. You're saying that people will move in by 2023, so how come the government doesn't have a Northern Link report? That's impossible. So let me defer to Mr. Lai Chuk Ho. Regarding railway development, we did communicate with THB regarding Gudong. Gudong station is very important because once that is completed, the Gudong North residents, they can use the Gudong station. They can take the Lok Ma Chau and take the East Rail to the downtown area. So when we talk to THB regarding the Gudong North and the occupancy of the public housing, they have to coordinate the efforts with the commencement of the Gudong station. So in our traffic assessment, if Gudong station can be built in a timely manner, then it can alleviate the Gudong North traffic congestion problems.
And we also have land transport means at an advanced stage to serve residents. What about the ratio of public housing? Secretary? Among the 70,000 units, 70% will be public housing. Can that be raised further? It's difficult for us to give a definite answer. If the infrastructure can support a certain population, we still have to go through the town planning procedures. I think that's more or less the limit that we can achieve given the present constraints. You don't support. You don't support. Okay. Dr. Kwakaki, thank you, Chairman. Hong Kong's people's common wish is to find more land to build housing, but in northeast NT, we see obviously some people benefit more, especially the property developers and the villagers have to make sacrifices. Several questions here. First, for phase 1 and phase 2, for the private lots, would you resume them through the land exchange program? Well, the land exchange programs are tailored to meet the needs of the 4 big property developers, Sun Hung K, Henderson, Cheung Kong, etc. What are the different proportions of land being held by these 4? And for the land resumed, private lots and government land added together, we will end up with an area which is more or less the same as that of Fanling Golf Course. And the task force on land supply has recommended that we would be resuming the first 32 hectares from the Fanling Golf Course and then 140 hectares from them. So when you work on the on these NDAs, are you planning to build connecting roads between NDAs and the Fanling Golf Course? The government said that traffic will be a problem. Now you said the traffic is no problem because you want to push forward with your proposal. You don't want to resume Fanling Golf Course. You would come up with all sorts of excuses not to do so. So I would like to hear your excuses. But if new roads are built, these traffic will no longer be an excuse, and you have no reason not to take up the recommendation from the task force on land supply. So let me take the second question first. On the recommendation of the task force on land supply, the CE has said earlier that the government is carefully examining the recommendations and will respond duly. Now, concerning the Fanling Golf Course, which is under the private recreational lease, how will we deal with the sites on PRLs? The Home Affairs Bureau is now conducting a review on private recreational leases, and the government will look at the results of that other review before we come up with an overall response. And we talk about an enhanced new town development model. That is not tailor-made for any particular property developer. This is a plan. And as long as the requirements and under the plan are met, the property developers, irrespective of their scale, can come forth to apply. When the planning department plans for a certain site, whether it's suitable for private or public housing, it will not consider who the landowners are. Well, the secretary is going around in circles. I just want the figures. Permanent secretary. Chairman, we would never make analysis of which property developers hold how many areas, how many hectares of land. In the first phase, 68 hectares of private lots will be affected, and the land, for the majority of them, the government will invoke the land resumption ordinance to resume the land, and there are only 2 applications for in situ land exchange involving around 1,000 units or so. Have you done any preparatory work regarding the Fanling Golf Course? Can you save your question for the second round? We do have time. So I would like to appeal to members who haven't pressed the button, please do so soonest, because I want to draw a line for the first round, and then we can still have a second round. And then we have Mr. Raymond Chen. Chairman, I hope that Hong Kong people will remember that for the funding application for advanced works for NT&E in 2014, and there have been strong protests within the electrical and outside the electrical for the 13 people who were dissatisfied. Who were dissatisfied with the plan were thrown into jail. I would not support this proposal, but now is too late to go back, and an objection is no use at all. And we were concerned back then. Most is related to the Fanling golf course, which is mentioned in Mr. Eddie Ju's motion. The government didn't want to do anything, and the task force on the land supply has recommended for part of it to be resumed. I hope that the secretary can try to be fair to Hong Kong people. Do not fear the rich and powerful and sacrifice the interest of the poor. Don't destroy villages' homes. I think the compensation amount for the Fanling golf course for resuming it would be less, and we don't have to spend so much on decontamination of the land size. And we used to ask for no demolition, no clearance, and now we are seeing this. We are asking for rehousing first, develop later. Now, let me ask this question. Now, if the households in the first phase have indicated their wish to be relocated, can all of them be rehoused in Po Shat Kei estate? Do you have enough space there to accommodate all? So if they have already indicated their wish, can all be taken in that estate? Because there is a rumor among the residents that in the advanced first phase, that will only happen in 2019, 2021. So not all of them will be rehoused at one go. And then about animals affected in Enclosure 7, the government sets out the policies in relation to pet animals. Well, we talk about community animals as well. You say they are stray animals. You said that you would continue to work with the animal welfare organizations to promote their welfare and encourage people to adopt such animals. Now, some volunteers are already taking the initiative to do something. They have been engaged in capture, neuter, and return, and sometimes they adopt some of the animals, and they are not provided with any subsidy from the government. We met with Paul Chan and asked for a dedicated fund to deal with this. And if they want to apply for public housing, they want to take their pets to their new homes, that is near impossible. So will the government try to address these concerns? Ms. Lin, Permanent Secretary. The member referred to Po Shat Wu estate, so I'll respond on that. In the middle of this year, that house estate will be completed and ready for population intake. So for a newly completed estate, we can't set aside too many units for those waiting to be rehoused. But our position is that for those affected in Phase 1 and those in Phase 2 who have indicated the wish to leave earlier and provide the necessary information, our plan is that we will take it up with the housing department so that these houses can be resettled in Po Shat Wu estate. But then different households have different needs on the size of the flats. So whether the needs match with the unit or flat mix in Po Shat Wu estate, that might not be possible sometimes. So, but we've been talking to the housing department, and we'll try to provide in situ rehousing as much as possible for animals. Pet animals. Since legislators have expressed their concern about pet animals, whether they can be taken to the new homes, we have talked to the Hong Kong Housing Authority and Hong Kong Housing Society, which is going to build some dedicated rehousing estate. The Housing Society said that as long as the households can present proof that they have kept the dogs for a number of years, and the dogs are their partners, and some of the dogs may be guide dogs, and the How's society exercise discretion in dealing with these pet animals? But even so, we can't expect all the dogs can be kept in their new homes. So we also talked to the AFCD. The AFCD will encourage the animal welfare organizations, the NGOs, to provide more refuge centers. Now, this coming Friday, we will come to the FC to apply for a $1 billion fund to encourage NGOs to maximize the use of government land for various uses, and which include these animal shelters. We will encourage NGOs to work on that. As for stray dogs, this has to do with wider animal rights and protection issue, and I will leave it up to the SFH or the FHB to deal with that. Thank you, Permanent Secretary. I have drawn a line for the first round, and if you are interested in asking a second round, please press the button. Next. You can't press? Well, that means the first round has not ended. We've got the Vice Chairman, Tommy Zhang, Mr. Alvin Yang, Mr. Eddie Zhu, Mr. Han Chan Pan, Mr. Tony Chan, Mrs. Regina Yip, Dr. Fernando Zhang, and Mr. Gary Chan for the first round. And there are 2 members for the second round, Mr. Andrew Wan and Mr. Gary Fan. I hope that you can speak as much as you like, because this is quite a contentious issue. And for the remaining items, well, we'll try our best to complete them. Well, please talk about the timing, because we would like to get prepared. We don't want the government officials to wait in vain, because we should be we should be discussing at 3:15 conservation. But then for item 7, it's about the Lam Wah Street project number 3468 RO. Are you asking the government officials to wait? And then we also have an item on conservation and so on. 11 members are on the queue. So many members I have asked to speak, and I can't stop you speaking. So I'll leave it up to the government officials to consider whether to wait further. Our meeting will last till 6:15 the most. Mr. Kenneth Low, I declare that my family possesses land in Tung North and Fanling North. I support the item be submitted to the PwC and FC. The NT Northeast project, if everything goes smoothly, will be completed 7 years later for the first phase, and I hope that the works can proceed as scheduled, and the government can can monitor the project well and gatekeep the quality of the works, so that there will not be delays in providing housing to the grassroots. I'm concerned about the operations on brownfield sites in the first phase. 141 operators will be affected in the first phase, and second phase 302, double the number in the first phase. The brownfield site operators have made contributions to Hong Kong. You should have rehousing first before chasing them away, so that their livelihood will not be affected. And I think that this is a good opportunity for better plan for industrial use of land, because in Tuen Mun we have grade 3 fires.
So if we have dangerous goods and fires, so if we have multi-story buildings in brownfields, shouldn't that be relocated in an industrial building? So what kind of brownfield industries do we have? Do they involve large machinery? Is there storage of dangerous goods? So the government, up till now, what actual statistics do you have, and what are your arrangements, and could you share this information with us? We understand that they are lumber yards. We don't have large scale could we have business operators and NDAs, our policy. Last year we came to LegCo. We have added Ex-gratia, some allowance. It's a cash allowance. So they would need to identify a location to continue their business, and of course the government provides some assistance. So if they want to conduct logistics work, we can provide some planning assistance. There is a study that we're doing. Could they relocate some brownfield activities into multi-story industrial building? Our study is a little bit late. It will be completed in the coming few months. That's because we wanted to have more public consultation. So previously we had said that we want to have information for discussion, so we do provide policy assistance, and we are trying to find land. For example, in Longgutan, there's a land reclamation. We can help these brownfield industries, but it would be difficult to provide further assistance. Anything else to add? So you support this item, Mr. Tommy Chung? The Liberal Party supports the proposal. Now, regarding Northern Link, the Liberal Party, we had discussed this when Mrs. Regina Yip was still in the party. So this year, the CE in the policy address said that she would focus on infrastructure. But Mr. Frank Chan from THB is not here, but you should convey the message to him. We feel that infrastructure, the Northern Link, and even the future Langtao, we need to have a faster pace for infrastructure. We would support your work on brownfields. I had previously said that some industries should be retained. If you resume their land, you'll put people out of work. These are elderly employees, and we have some industries that have existed for decades, and sometimes it's not just a monetary issue. So I'd like you to consider that. So regarding the golf course, in the motion debate, the Secretary, you would have heard that the Liberal Party objects to resuming the golf course. But we talked about middle term, long term, and the golf course cannot be handled in a middle term to long term. So you can use the 2 or 3 minutes to explain that even if the lease expires, you still need to do an environmental impact assessment. It'll take a few years, and then you have to do a traffic impact assessment. So everything cannot be conducted concurrently. We don't know if there are some people who will seek judicial review. We don't know if there are some antique trees. We always hear that there's an antiquity and monument. So the golf course might also have a lot of collective memories, and people will object. So this is not a short-term, medium-term project. And the Liberal Party has always been against resuming the golf course. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Mr. Chung, and the Liberal Party support. Now, regarding the situation in the Fanling golf course, we have to look at the Home Affairs Bureau study. If you look at it from a technical perspective, in the Land Supply Task Force, they're talking about a midterm is 5 to 10 years. So hypothetically, can the golf course provide housing? You are correct, it cannot. Is it a short, medium term? Well, the task force had looked at it is a short-term plan, and a short-term definition is 5 to 10 years. Anything to add? No. Then we have Mr. Alvin Yuan. Thank you, Chairman. I need to state NTNE, if it cannot be handled, then the Civic Party will is against that. So we've had discussions for 10 plus years. The residents don't want their homes to be demolished. They don't want to relocate, and they had been arrested. Now they compromise and they want to be relocated. They also want to have to continue their farming practices. We understand in Hong Kong needs development. You'll need to sacrifice some people's interests, but in fact, the residents are cooperating reluctantly. They just want the government to come up with some solution. They are not asking for the moon, but the government doesn't seem to want to extend a generous or an olive branch. So could you relocate them? Could you allow them to continue on their farmland? Well, that is not unreasonable. If you recall the Chao Yun Chun, there was a solution, and it, of course, we had to rely on Mr. Lau Wong Fat. But is the government helpless? There's government land, there are other facilities. I don't see the government have any sincerity to resolve the problem. So regarding relocation, if you look at the document, they mention it 52 times, but they never mentioned what the arrangement was. So the residents want to be relocated and then start construction. They want to be given some temporary housing, and we don't see any positive response. So the Secretary, could you answer the residents' requests? Are you totally unable to meet their requests? I have to thank Mr. Young for his question. If we have some relocation, for example, a Chao Yun village, and I had explained on numerous occasions that if we use a low density land arrangement to settle the residents, it's not feasible. So there are settlement measures. They are high density. We have means tests, so they can apply with a housing authority or housing society. Now, Mr. Jiang Chongtai also asked, could they relocate the residents first and then start works? I had stated very clearly that is not feasible. We are willing to provide reasonable relocation, but we also need to respect the residents. If housing society, housing authority cannot satisfy them, we respect their requests, but we cannot guarantee satisfying all demands. For example, we will not deal with in the past we would not deal with these requests for public housing, and now we're trying to accommodate them as much as possible. But if they say they want to continue living in their farms, we won't force them out. Well, if you can't satisfy everybody, is it because you're not generous enough? So is it really impossible to have farming and living quarters at the same time? Well, if we have shelters, some superstructures on the farmland, they can sleep overnight. That's not a problem, but they cannot have it as a permanent housing. On private land, if we tolerate some housing, and in the future if they can find another piece of private land, So under certain conditions, we are willing to permit that. Well, the government should have a sense of gratitude. I said just now that the Civic Party would not support this item. Mr. Eddie Chu? Thank you, Chairman. I recall Mr. Lowaikok say that NTNE is finally on the way. Well, it's not praise, it's actually criticism. We've waited 20 plus years and mistakes were made along the way. If you recall, 10 years ago, when you started consultation, back then there was some hope that after 97, it was the first new NDA. Would you allow for more participation, the affected residents? So if they had housing difficulties, the government would consider their needs. The government would pay heed to their plight. Now the global trend is to have environmental and development of equal importance. So from the consultation days, did you hear their views? You have not. All we hear is that the real estate developers land for land swap. So when if you had exercised the land resumption orders in 2013, that we would have completed a quarterfinal appeal. We would have a case precedence. Would we have so many excuses for this and that? Where you would have to have private-public participation with the real estate developers. So these officials are new in the post. They don't recall how the government owes the NT residents, how they had subsidized real estate developers. Chairman, I have a motion. The motion is about a fair request over the years. That is, Hong Kong is not a class society. If you're poor, if you are in a PRH, you will be trampled by the government and the rich. Those who play golf, they will never feel that they need to sacrifice. So, Deputy Chairman, your father always says that we need to sacrifice for the greater good, but why are the ones sacrificing the villagers? So the government says that our hands are tied, there's nothing we can do, but we won't forget. We won't forget that you have been trampling the poor, you've been trampling the farmers, the villagers, and you think we will forget? Two wrongs don't make a right. By postponing and creating a housing crisis, that doesn't make it right. So my motion today is very simple. That is, the Land Supply Task Force, they conduct public consultation and 60% of respondents call for resuming the golf course. Lam Chok Ting said that you are moving 300,000 people into NT North.
And you can't go on that indefinitely. So the Fanling golf course should replace most of the area in the NT Northeast so that you can cut down on resuming farmland. That's the most reasonable approach. So I'll deal with your motion later on. So would you support this funding application? No, I objected. Mr. Chen Han-pan. People don't support anti-any development, don't support reclamation. Where is the solution for addressing the housing problem? Let's be rational. But then the government must also address the concerns raised by members and also the legislators. And one of the things I would like to talk about is the Dale's Corner elderly home. Previously, the representatives there have got in touch with us many times, and they want a reasonable rehousing. The administration, including the Development Bureau and Labor Welfare Bureau, met with them. But in the meeting, they said something superficial, but they are not tackling the root of the problem. In phase 1, you will affect the outer facilities which have to be demolished. I have moved a motion to ask the government in developing Tung North NDA promise that the elderly in Dale's Corner and the operator can be rehoused in situ. Why are the elderly and the carers so important? They've lived all along there in this very good environment, and there is relationship established between the elderly and their carers. For the new elderly home built by the government, if the operator or the existing operator is not allowed to operate there, that goes against our wish. And now if somebody gets the bid and some other elderly are housed there, then that means the Dale's Corner's elderly can't be rehoused. And we have approved the funding for an elderly home which can house the same number of elderly people now staying in the Dale's Corner. So I hope that the government can undertake that there is seamless transition, and there should be also be in situ rehousing. Secretary, thank you, Chang. Mr. Chan, we've been working very hard on that. So our aim is that they don't have to leave Dale's Corner. Sorry, you put it in a very tactful way. You talk about elderly. I must also emphasize that the carer should also be cared about. Mr. Chan, let me talk about it in two parts. 160 elderly people will be affected under phase 1, so there should be enough space or places for them. And under the SWD, there is a special task force headed by the Deputy Director of SWD, who is talking to other elderly homes for them to take over the remaining number of elderly homes. Once the facility is completed, the current operator of Dale's Corner is asking whether they will be given the priority to operate the new facility. Under the present policy for government facilities, the usual approach is to have open tender. Well, I'll be very quick in answering. But for this particular facility, there is some special circumstance, and the elderly and the carer have established a long-term relationship. So that we will also take out tender. But then in the scoring system, special consideration will be given to the incumbent operator. High marks will be given to them. For the 100 elderly people, they will only be affected towards the end or the latter half of 2020. So that allows some time for the government and the incumbent operator to reach a more acceptable approach. I hope that the Development Bureau will coordinate. So if we leave it up to the operator and SWD to talk between themselves, then that would be difficult. I hope the Development Bureau can help. So we'll deal with Mr. Chen and Pan's motion in a minute. Do you support this item? Yes. Mr. Tung Lee, Chair. Yes? I can't hear you. When will we take? We will put it to a vote. 5 members have yet to speak for the first time. So 4 minutes each, and then there will be 2 legislators for the second round, 2 minutes each. So that will be the time needed going forward. Mr. Tung, Chair, thank you. Chairman, like other members, I support this proposal to be submitted to the PWSC, and I hope that that can be done soonest. The project can provide housing land for the grassroots, who are facing a severe housing problem. So the faster it can be done, the better it is for our Hong Kong people. So since we have a serious housing problem, we should adopt a multi-pronged approach. Some legislators refer to the Fanling golf course. Whether it can be used for some other purposes in the future, we have to go through certain procedures: planning, environmental impact, transport impact assessment, and we also have to be mindful about the ecology, old and valuable trees. Well, we can consider other uses for the place, but we should not be breaching our established procedures for reasons like the ecology reasons and other reasons, and we find out that it can't be used for building housing, then we have to accept it. We should not move our goalposts indiscriminately. We should take things forward in parallel. This project is divided into the first phase and remaining phase. The Secretary would like to compress the timetable as much as possible. That I understand. For the remaining works, we thank the government for giving the residents the option to move earlier, and that their rights will not be affected. So that is a flexible approach. And I hope that the government can also consider how to deal with the government land in the second phase. Some people have occupied certain government plots and seek compensation. And please make sure that you spend public money prudently. I heard about members talking about agricultural rehabilitation. Please try to help farmers as much as possible. And relatively speaking, I think you are moving too slowly on brownfield sites. How come that you are working on agricultural rehabilitation and you are not coming up with a brownfield site operators policy earlier? As pointed out by the Deputy Chairman, the brownfield site operators have played an important role in our economy. There will be more operators affected in the second phase. 140 or so will be affected in the first phase. But in the remaining phase, I wonder how many will be affected. Large sums are involved in this funding application. So can you give us more detailed breakdowns when you go to PWSC? You talk about advanced works, $10 billion. So it's not just about site formation. I have a question on the Shat Wu Hui affluent polishing plant. A large amount is involved. So the capacity will be changed, increased from 65,000 cubic meters to 170,000 cubic meters. And then you will turn it into a tertiary treatment center. My question is simple. So how will you deal with the water after the tertiary treatment? I understand that the grey water can be you put to use. So do you have any plan to be more environmentally friendly? Please give him a writing reply, because in the interest of time. Well, is the case that I don't have a second round to ask? I didn't say that I will draw a line, so I'll ask for a second round. Ms. Virginia Yip, the New People's Party supports this item. The Secretary said that we started discussing NTN Northeast development in 1998, and it stopped some time because of the financial tsunami, and the discussion restarted in 2008. I've served as a legislator for 10 years. I've witnessed many arguments on the project here. The project might affect those who work and live there, but this is a much needed NDA, and we will provide a lot of housing units, so we support it. I have two concerns. One is transport. For NTNE, Tung, Fanling, traffic is often congested. The Fanling highway is also narrow. The northern link, the secretary is non-committal on the timetable. Even if you have the Fanling bypass, there will still be congestion at the Tolo highway. So how will you handle that? Thank you, member, for your question. Mr. Lai has just said that the Transport and Housing Bureau is in close dialogue with us. The Northern Links development will dovetail with the population intake. The member asked a very specific timeline. I said that I will go back to check with the THB. But anyway, the two will dovetail. When there is a larger population in the NDA, that means there will be population intake, so it will be in 2026-27, not as early as 2023 and 24. Maybe some private housing units can be provided in that period. I have a second concern on brownfield site operations. Not many brownfield sites will be resumed under phase 1, is that right? And also, when will your study on brownfield sites be completed? We have 2 brownfield site studies. They are well advanced now. I believe that in the next few months, the studies will be completed. Ms. Yip, let me explain. For the planning department's study, facts will be examined into where are the brownfield sites, what kind of activities are there. Well, it's not there to identify the development potential. That's not the study is about. In other words, well, the planning department will do more work. Based on the outcome, we will then, well, we have 700 hectares of brownfield sites not in the NDAs. That's according to government statistics. The development potential is higher, so that's what we will do. Now, another study will be completed in the next few years, and how we should relocate the brownfield site operations into multi-story buildings. And the government will come up with recommendation on how and where that will be done. We hope that within this year, the recommendations can be put forth for the community's consideration. That has dragged on for several years. I hope that you can really complete the studies within this year. Agricultural rehabilitation, I know that the Development Bureau has done a lot to help the farmers. But for the brownfield sites, a lot of people said that the government doesn't have to reclaim land. All it needs to do is to resume the brownfield sites. Well, the issue is complicated. There are many existing operators. I am very worried that in the next phase of development, many brownfield site operations will be phased out. And I am concerned about how many activities can still remain to be in operation. Is it the case that fewer operators will be affected? In the first phase, well, in the first phase, 8 hectares will be affected, and then for the second phase, 42 hectares or so.
Chairman, I will not support this item. NTNE will not receive my support because I have encountered the struggle. It is a bulldozer item from top to bottom. You have ignored the residents, their lifestyle, and how can you improve their lifestyle? You have not considered that, and now you want to have a land swap. You are benefiting the real estate developers, the large consortiums. So, well, we don't have enough vote and support in LegCo. We also had a lot of unhappy events. In the struggle. We also seen a lot of verbal attacks, and people have even been sent to jail. And it is a very unfortunate incident. And so there's no way I can support this. There are a lot of concerns, and one of the earliest was the Dill's Corner, where we have 1,000 elderly people living there. It is a relatively good environment. You now want to forcibly relocate them, and it is very regrettable. So ultimately, the government has backed down a little bit. They will build an old age home in the vicinity and try to make it a seamless integration. I recall the government also promised that it will be a seamless integration. So we see in the first phase, 160 elderly will be affected, and next year they will start demolishing the old age homes. So you need to know Dill's Corner, the ex-British military facility, doesn't have escalators. So a lot of elderly are wheelchair bound, and they cannot walk down a flight of stairs. So if they need to visit a clinic, they have to be carried. So I know that you have 160 elderly affected. The arrangement is to relocate to the undemolished units. So 3 units are affected, and you say there is sufficient space to accommodate the 160 elderly. But what kind of space is it? Is it suitable for the 160 elderly? What are the actual arrangements? I need to understand that the 160 elderly, what are their health conditions? Are they willing to relocate? What choices do they have? If there's a change in the payment, or if there's a change in the care arrangement, are they aware of it? Do they have any choice? How many of them have relatives? How many of them don't have relatives and are relying on SWD? Or they have been signed off to the SWD? Now, the new building will have 1,750 beds. Now, this monstrosity is very alarming in the sense that, well, I'm happy that they can be accommodated, but we don't want to see a prison-like structure where we have 1,000 elderly concentrated. They are not goods, they are people. So I would like to know, what is the design? The so-called old age homes, how can it be more home-like rather than a prison? So you might not have to thank Mr. Fernando Chung for his reminder. We want to do the best given our constraints. So, as I said just now, we have a task force to deal with that. So I can provide the information to Mr. Fernando Chung. So Mr. Fernando Chung does not support the item, and Mr. Chan Hakan. First round has been cut off. You can queue in the second round, Mr. Chan Hakan. We've all heard that this has been the plan for 10 years. The PRH, 10 years ago, you had to wait 2 years. Now it's 5.5 years. So if we cannot accelerate and endorse the program, then we are doing a disservice to people in the PRH queue. So I support this, but I have 3 points for the government to consider. First, I know that Lands Department colleagues are doing registration work. So Ms. Chu has been to the village with us to do some consultation work, but you need to be patient and forgiving, because when the villagers hear that you are there to register, they get agitated, and you should not add to their fears. You should try to calm them down. So a lot of colleagues also mentioned that we'll have an extra 300,000 people, and you said that Mr. Frank Chan you will correspond with Mr. Frank Chan regarding the Northern Link. But Mr. Frank Chan said that he would still need to study the Northern Link. So if we have 200,000 people move in and 100,000 people who rely on East Railway, and if we have 100,000 people driving private vehicles, you'll be adding to traffic congestion in Tolo Harbor, and I'm afraid it's going to be a disaster. The third point regarding Sek Wuhui effluent facility, the Environment Bureau representative had been to District Council, but I hope during the upgrade works you can communicate with the residents when the works vehicles enter the site. You should not affect the residents, the villagers. You also made some pledges after upgrading the effluent plant. You can open up the facility. You have to live up to your promise, and most importantly, you should not affect the villagers. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Your first reminder, we will remind our frontline staff. I won't repeat what I said on traffic. We will continue to communicate with the Transport Housing Bureau. So I'll defer to my colleague regarding the effluent plant. Thank you for your views. When the works are underway, we will set up a communication, a liaison group. So during the works, if there are any needs, we can facilitate communication. So questions 2 and 3 have been covered. So Mr. Chanakan, we will support the item. So second round, we'll draw the line. So does Ms. Abraham Shek wish to speak? You need to press the button. So we have 4 speakers who want to speak in the second round. After the second round, we will take a vote on 2 motions. So please take note of our arrangement. Mr. Gary Fan, the question I have is about Annex 7, where Phase 1 affects 30 households and it covers 4 hectares. So the government has identified 4 hectares of government land for farm rehabilitation, but the villagers say that the released government land is a hillside, a lot of wild boars, there's no water and electricity, and the farmers, they need living quarters as well, but the government land cannot accommodate their living needs. So rather than identifying that kind of land, why can't you allow the farmers to continue farming in the existing site? Why do you have to forcibly relocate them? Why do you forcibly destroy their farmland? We already have farmland. You want to relocate them? Secretary? So if there are living needs and farming rehabilitation needs, I answered that we have separate arrangements. Now, regarding the government land, It is in an agricultural land. Of course, there's nobody farming there right now. So do we have some basic infrastructure to facilitate rehabilitation? We will continue to communicate with the farmers. Regarding the sites, we've done our best to identify land in the existing government farmland. Mr. Lau Gok Fen. After the first round, I'd like we already had relocation plans, and so the Development Bureau has attended all the consultation sessions. We have assistance of Lands Department. Now AFCD needs to do more, especially. So the department has done its best to settle the residents, but the animal, for example, in Fanling North, we have identified land for the sheep, but AFCD has not pledged that how many animals are in the community. So will they have chips installed? Will there be large-scale adoption activities? Can the AFCD pledge that that we will have to put these animals down in the name of development? So when we reach the PWSC stage, could THB, AFCD provide us with more details that how will the Northern Link rail infrastructure be developed? The Development Bureau has done a good job, but the other bureaus don't seem to be able to coordinate. So I'd like to have AFCD respond first. Well, AFCD will continue to cooperate with Development Bureau. Our animal husbandry group will continue its work, including adoption, castration. Now, regarding the installation of chips, we encourage pet animal owners to register their animals. Now, arrangements after adoption, we will continue to coordinate our efforts with the Development Bureau. Next, Mr. Tony Jie. I expressed my view and asked a question, and Chairman said I don't have enough time, so I'd like to use this opportunity. The government, can they respond to my Sek Wu Hui question? Well, Sek Wu Hui, when the water quality is enhanced, it will reach a grade 3. So we have an arrangement with the Water Supply Department for flushing needs, so we can meet a third of the demand, and we will try to identify more opportunities for the recycled water. Chairman, I do recall similar recommendations. The funding does not include the use of treated water. You might have other engineering works. Well, our works are for the effluent plant, the upgrading and increasing of capacity. So the recycled water,
It will be for the WSD to look at the infrastructure for doing that, and this will be included as part of their infrastructure project. Well, so this means that the amount doesn't cover that, right? Because it doesn't cover what you said about laying of pipes and so on. Does it not include? Does the Secretary know about this? In our infrastructure projects for NDAs, in the water supply system and the surface reservoirs, we have made plans for using reclaimed water for flushing purposes. So I hope that you can give us more details when you get to the BWSC. It seems a large amount, but it does cover a lot. So please provide more information. Mr. Eddie Ju. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, the government officials seem to be saying that even if there is the in-situ land exchange program, we don't know who will benefit. Well, let's not feign ignorance. Well, obviously, they are the 4 property developers. Can you tell me, is there anyone who is not the 4 property developers who's involved in the in-situ land exchange program? Second point, the permanent secretary said that you have provided farming land options for choosing by the farmers. They now face a problem. You designate certain spots on the map, and they said that, well, all our properties and homes are in NTNE, and if we have to go from NTNE to this particular spot on the map, then what will you do to help me? Ms. Lin said that as long as it is government land, then you can't live on it. You just shut out that possibility. So that means that's not an option. So don't be misled, colleagues. Don't believe that they are very good to farmers and they're not good enough for the brownfield site operators. They are not good to both groups. Ms. Lin, on the question of agricultural rehabilitation, people may hold different views, but I would like to state clearly the government's stance. We don't have a policy or a rehousing arrangement whereby the farmers can live on the farming land. If farmers have accommodation need, we can arrange for public housing for them through a non-means tested or means tested approach. And for agricultural rehabilitation, we'll try to identify suitable sites. And most of the sites are within the agricultural zone. And if further facilities have to be built, we have to talk to the farmers further to see whether we should work further on those sites. For those affected, they will leave only after mid-2020, so there is still time for us to further discuss. Mr. Ju seems to be saying that we are telling a barefaced lie. All the information can be looked up at the Lands Registry. I was responding to another member's question on how much land the different developers hold in the NT and where are they. So I said that we haven't made an analysis on that kind of situation. Mr. Abraham Shak, I declare that I represent the real estate sector and I don't hold land in the NT and East. And I'm also a member of the Fanling Golf Course. Chairman, I support this funding application because we've waited too long. I just have this demand. For those elderly people living there, they should be rehoused as soon as possible. They should be satisfied with the new residential care home. They have contributed a lot to Hong Kong, so don't take them too far away. And then second question on land resumption. Would it be the case that nobody will not get any housing? And that is no person is being displaced. So that's all long been the established policy, right? Third question. Mr. Ju moved a motion. How is it relevant to the funding application? I think it goes beyond the scope. How can you allow for that motion to be dealt with and discussed, Chairman? Well, I will answer your last question later on. Secretary, any response to the first two questions? Thank you, Mr. Shek. On the elderly people, you refer to the elderly households. You are not talking about the Dale's Corner. I'm talking about all elderly people. For eligible households who are affected, they should be resettled in situ. If we want to model after Chuk Yun as Chun and Choi Yun Chun, then I'm afraid we can't adopt that approach this time. In clearing the land, depending on the circumstances, if we have relaxed the criteria for rehousing to HS and HA estates, but if they are displaced, we would definitely put in arrangements for them. Mr. Shek, Mr. Ju's motion talks about the anti-NE development, and he's putting forth an alternative option. So that's why I accept it. I agree that it be discussed. It goes beyond the scope. Well, I don't think it goes beyond. Well, as long as you support it, I'm fine. So all members have spoken, so we have to handle the two motions. The first one is moved by Mr. Eddie Chu. So, Mr. Chu, would you read it out? Yes, please read it out. Can I claim a division? Well, okay. The division bell will be rung for 5 minutes. Colleagues, thank you. The panel urges the government to, as soon as possible, confirm the resumption of the 172 hectares in Fanling Golf Course for building, housing, and the ancillary facilities to replace the anti-NE development plan so as to minimize the destruction to the farmland and the need to evict residents in that area. Can we switch on the mic for Mr. Gary Chan? Point of order. After we've taken a vote on the two motions, do we have to put this proposal to the vote? Well, if yes, then I will move that we shorten the voting time. Well, for those members who have spoken, they have already indicated their stance, so I roughly know what the results will be. This is Regina Yip. I declare that I'm a member of the golf course and I won't vote. Mr. Jeffrey Lam? Yeah, you are also a member of the Fanling Golf Course? Deputy Chairman? I declare that I'm a member of the golf club.
三不对。好，咁咧就
All right, let's have a vote. So voting begins. Please press a button. Anyone who hasn't voted, please check your vote. Voting is closed. Display of results: 24 present, 6 for, 16 against, and 1 abstained. So the motion was negatived. Now let's vote on the second motion, moved by Mr. Chen Han-pang, Alice MAK, and Gary Chen. So please read out the motion. Thank you. The panel urges the government in developing Tung North NDA promises to arrange for in-situ rehousing for the elderly and operators in those corner gardens so that the elderly and the carers can transition to the new facility under construction seamlessly. Seamless transition. So the Chinese word was a typo. So we now put to the vote. Okay, voting begins. Sorry. So is there a claim for division? No? So those who are in favor, please raise your hand. (17-4). Those who are against, please raise your hand. No objection. Is there anyone who's abstained? Please raise your hand. 1 abstention. So the motion is passed. Thank you very much. I've heard that the majority of members support this item being submitted to the PWSC. So government departments, please make the necessary arrangements accordingly.
Item number 5. The progress report on antiquities. So please refer to CB2 456 1819, paper 05 and 06. So we can invite the government into the room. So if you wish to speak, you'll have to press the button. So in the officials in attendance are Mr. Wang Weilan, Secretary for Development, Ms. Joey Lam, Mr. Jose Yam, Commissioner for Heritage, and Ms. Susanna Siu, Executive Secretary, Antiquities and Monuments Office. So do you have anything to add also from 09? Every year we will be reporting on the antiquities protection situation. So we have the latest update report, and I would like to have the Commissioner give us an update through a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. I will go through some of the measures, recent measures. So the Heritage Conservation Conservation Fund was established in 2016 to provide subsidies for public education. We also have funding for studies. So we have 8 universities who can apply for funding, and also the maximum funding is 2 million. So the 2 projects have received 16 applications, and they have gone through vetting by the commission, The funds involved are some 12 million. The successful applications have started their work in the third quarter in 2018 and will be completed in 24 months. So regarding revitalization, we have 19 government-owned historic buildings that have been included in the plan. In phase 1 and 2, they are already in operation. So we have 5 items that have received awards in UNESCO, including the Savannah College for Art and Design, which was previously the North Kowloon Magistracy, and May Hall House has been upgraded to youth hostel. We also have the Blue House developments. The Blue House have also received the highest grade of award, and this is the first Hong Kong project that received this award. Now regarding phase 3, we have the Hong Kong News Museum that has been revitalized. We also have the Ho Par Museum and also the Fanling Magistracy will commence operations in the first quarter of 2019. Phase 4, including the School Street, Madam Hodong building, these works had started in 2018. Regarding phase 5, including the Lun Wall Market and our Gordon Hard Camp, have been identified and have been announced in July 2018. So we are now in the preliminary stages. So for historic monuments, the government had promoted a fund where private owners can be assisted in the maintenance. So the cap from 1 million has been increased to 2 million. The scope has also been extended to NGO tenants of historic monuments. So we have some 60 applications and the funding is some 62 million. So regarding our grading of historic monuments, with the assistance of AAB and the CE's approval, in 16th of November 2018, under the Antiquities and Monuments Ordinance, we had some buildings in Hong Kong U that had been deemed as monuments. So we now have 120 historic buildings in Hong Kong. So AAB has been reviewing the grading of historic buildings, and 90% of the work is complete now. So aside from the 144 historic monuments, the public have also put forward some 300 suggestions, and the AMO, the AAB, will review the list of buildings, and there are some 250 in total. So regarding the private buildings, heritage protection, we have used different incentives. For example, the Sai Kung Shaw film studios we've been negotiating with the Shaw Brothers studios. So after a lot of effort, in 2017, the owner had agreed to retain in part or in whole some of the buildings. So the Town Planning Board will review these arrangements. So the Marian Allfathers quarters are also a grade 1 historic monument. We've been in negotiations with the owners. The owners had wanted to demolish the quarters to develop a housing development. But after a lot of discussions, the owners had agreed in June 2018 that at the same time of developing the housing development, they would retain the Marian Allfathers quarters. So it will be retained and will be part of the future development. The Town Planning Board in January this year had scrutinized the application and approved. So in 2018 October, the owner of the the movie theater had agreed to mandatory the former state theater. They had agreed to undergo a mandatory auction. So we are in negotiations with the owner to negotiate a preservation of the former state theater. So the owner is responding positively. So starting from 2012, we have been updating our guidelines. So given our experience in antiquities, we have been making new revisions. So we now have new versions since 2016 July and December 2017, where we provide more guidelines. So the latest version will be completed in the beginning of 2019. I won't go through a lot on education and publicity. I just want to mention that we had a carnival event on Hollywood Road in 2018 where we had a series of cultural and arts events. We had attracted a significant audience. The AAB, starting from 2018, have been working with our counterparts. So we have been trying to achieve synergistic effects. So starting from 27th of August 2018, our work has been transferred from the LCSD to come under the Development Bureau. So this exercise is to fine-tune the outcomes of our work, and it does not incur extra financial expenditure. And that will conclude my report. Okay. So if members have questions, you'll have to press the button. And right now we have 6. So we'll allow 4 minutes. Mr. Eddie Chu. Thank you, Chairman. The Commissioner has gave us a lot of examples illustrating what the government has done in the past year, but the public need to see that we don't have problems on individual items, whether there's a discussion with the owner, whether there have been discussions. Now we have 120 historic monuments, and previously we had 1,444 buildings, and buildings that were not graded. There was a list. So do we have any policy framework to preserve these buildings? So even though if you gave us an example where you have a discussion with the owner, where the graded monuments are not demolished, the figures I have on hand indicate that starting from 2010 till now, there has been one grade 1 historic monument that has been demolished and 2 grade 2 historic monuments demolished. And if you include some sort of garden factory, that's 3. And we also have historic monuments that are not graded, and 7 of them were demolished. So that is some 20 plus buildings. That 2010, from 2010 till now. So these historic buildings, these 1,000 plus buildings, the trend is as you drag and postpone, land prices go up. When you renegotiate with the owner, the difficulty is compounded. So we cannot be as confident as the CE, Mrs. Carrie Lam. So I'll give you credit for your Blue House. You get rewards, but when will we review the AMO? It's a piece of legislation that's been in existence for 40 plus years. So aside from statutory monuments, we need to have legislative safeguard for different levels of historic monuments. Thank you, Mr. Chu. Well, the government, in paragraph 2 of our paper, we have stated our position. I won't repeat. We feel that we have to rely on the AMO. To give an example, if we have some non-government buildings, if the owner disagrees, we won't grade it as a historic monument. So we do hear objections, and why doesn't the government resume it? The government position is that might have. I'm not saying I want to convert the 1,000 buildings to make it a historic monument, but so do you think that the 20 plus buildings that were graded as historic monuments, they deserve to be demolished? No, that's not the case. But you are aware that some historic monuments that were graded, the building is demolished, but the historic or cultural element can be preserved through other means. When we encounter these scenarios, we will negotiate with the owners, and our experience has been improving over the years. So, owners are responding positively, and it doesn't mean that they won't demolish the whole building. Mr. Gary Fan, I have two questions. The Antiquities Advisory Board in 2005, how they rated the monument, they had listed 6 principles: the historic value, the construction value, the social value, the community value, and retaining its exterior. So the older the building, do they have a higher rating according to age? So the Tang Dynasty will rate more than Qing Dynasty. So I've seen that kind of rating. What about post-war rating? How do you evaluate that? That is my second question. So TCE, Mrs. Carrie Lam, when the central Wan Chai bypass was commenced, when there was a disagreement over the relocation of the Star Ferry terminal, and the Queens Pier was rated grade 1.
Okay.
And that's because we needed to reclaim land in Central to. And for Fanling Golf Course, individual scholars said that the golf course has a high historical value and it carries a great significance in terms of the colonial days. And some even said that the AAB should have a full-scale conservation of the Fanling Golf Course. These two are post-war historic buildings. For the Queen's Pier, which was demolished because of reclamation as Central, and also the Fanling Golf Course, which we are asking to be resumed, what criteria would the AAB use to come up with the recommendation for the Development Bureau? Let me answer your second question first. To my understanding, last September, the AAB has considered the relevant application and agreed to grade the site. So that falls within the ambit of the AAB. Mr. Fan's first question, well, I can only share my understanding. I can't speak on behalf of the AAB. The historical interest is not just about the history or the duration of the relics, but then different relics may have different considerations. Say for one site, which has higher historical significance, maybe a historical figure has lived there before. So even if that historical site doesn't last as long as another historical site, it will get a higher rating. So Mr. Fan referred to several criteria, and the AAB would look at these criteria and come up with a grading. There have been cases where a grading has been given, then the community has raised different views, and the AAB has re-rated certain historic buildings. Now, how does the AAB view the Fanling Golf Course? All I can say is that they will start the rating work. It is going to be done independently. That will be undertaken by the AAB. Have they given you a timetable? Well, they will not give us a set timetable. Different considerations have to be taken on board. My understanding is that the AAB has said in September that they will conduct a rating exercise, but we don't have any timeline. Mr. Raymond Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask the Commissioner. The Commissioner spent a lot of time to talk about the revitalizing historic buildings through partnerships scheme. We support this program, and every time when they come to seek funding from the LegCo, the Commissioner has tried to give us a very careful explanation, and the LegCo members will also ask you the effectiveness of the previous batches before we look at the funding proposal. Now, apart from that, there are also some other plans. In 2009, we have the Conservation Central plan. And this is somehow different from the revitalization scheme there. We have the Tycoon project, which we are very concerned about. And for these other projects outside the revitalizing historic buildings scheme, we have relatively little opportunity to ask questions on these other projects. Now, apart from the revitalization project, will you be coming up with some other projects whereby you would be conserving certain projects under some other conditions? For Tycoon, the Jockey Club has given a lot of money, so we don't need to seek funding from the LegCo. Maybe the different standards were adopted. Let me cite an example. In November last year, the Tycoon said that it doesn't want the place to be used by anybody to promote political causes, and an author was denied the chance to host a forum there. But then there was public outcry, and the Tycoon later reversed its decision. But anyway, the damage was done. My question is, for such revitalized historical buildings, in terms of its usage, say the members of the public or legislators might not agree with their handling of things, can our views, we be reflected to them? So they use the reason that they don't want the place to be used by anyone for promoting their political views. Is this something drawn up by the organizer or the government? How can we avoid a repeat of such incidents in the future? Mr. Yam, or Chairman, Secretary. It has to do with wider policy issues. Conserving central projects is unique. It has a cluster of historic buildings which is not found in other places, say former Hollywood police quarters. Now, at this stage, are we seeing some similar clusters of buildings in other districts? But I don't rule out the possibility that that will be the approach again adopted in the future if we find a similar building clusters. But right now, we don't have such a plan. Mr. Chen talked about the different operators managing the compounds. In relation to the incident referred to by Mr. Chan, we said back then that the government didn't play any role, and the operator changed its stance afterwards for some reasons. We should give the greatest flexibility to the operator and its management. It's better than the government controlling every aspect of their management. I would not comment on the particular incident mentioned. Now, in terms of the relationship between the government and the operator, once the government has given us the framework, we should not be interfere with their daily operations. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. In 2008, the government launched the Revitalizing Historic Buildings Through Partnership scheme. And one of it is Feng Yun Hall. It started operation in 2013, and 3 years later, the place was handed back to the government because they couldn't run the plan. They were in the site, and it was included in batch 5, but nobody won the bid. And then it will be included in batch 6. I would like to understand. Say if nobody comes forth to apply in batch 6, so what will happen to this item project? So will the government take back the site for its for running the project on its own? Say if the operators, say for certain projects, find that there is operation difficulty, is there anything that the government can do to help them to continue with its operation? That's the first question. And this scheme has been up and running for over 10 years. Is there any plan to review or enhance this scheme? Thank you very much for your question. The Feng Yun Hall situation is a bit special, and that shows that yes, we face challenges in revitalizing historic buildings. I visited the place myself. It was in Ma Wan, and it's quite remote. It has got enough visitors, and the operator just stopped the project. The government has taken over the place, and it has opened it up for public enjoyment. We will try to include it in batch 6, and we hope that bidders would come forth. And failing that, we will review the situation again. It's difficult for me to say for certain what will happen now. Now, as for support, can we do more? We have to be very careful. Now, we provide the land to the operator. We also provide some subsidy for their operation. But the policy objective is that the operator can be self-financed. We will not change that policy. But for particularly difficult projects, can we consider doing more? Yes, we can consider. But we have to be very prudent in spending public money. The Super Typhoon Mangkhut hit Hong Kong, and after that, I know that some historic buildings have been damaged, and one is the cathedral in Ma On Shan, a Grade 2 historic building. And some villages said that the building has been deserted all along, and it's been severely damaged after the typhoon. Now, before you revitalize historic buildings, they should be managed by the government. In case of destruction or damage, what will happen? Would you be implementing conservation plans to ensure that the historic buildings will not be further damaged to facilitate your revitalization in the future? Commissioner, after the Super Typhoon Mangkhut hit Hong Kong, the CHO had inspected the 120 monuments in Hong Kong. Among the 120 in Douda Street, only some gas lamps were damaged because a tree from the stone wall collapsed. And the CHO worked together with the town gas company and conducted on-site inspections, and we embarked on repair works right away. Now, for the Ma On Shan Cathedral, it was under the management of the Lands Department, which in turn notified the AMO, and the Buildings Department and the AMO conducted on-site visit. There was some damage on the roof of the building, and the AMO provided professional advice to the Buildings Department and the Lands Department to facilitate their repair work. Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. The ceiling of the subsidy for the Historic Building Financial Management System scheme is $2 million. And very often the repair work has to be are divided up into phases because the amount is not enough. The government has set aside $1 billion recently to help NGOs to put to better uses vacant government premises, and the ceiling for that amount, the scheme is several dozen million dollars. So for the scheme, can you increase the maximum amount? You talk about $2 million to repair and maintain historic buildings. The sum is grossly insufficient. And second question, after the historic buildings have been revised, the visitor number may be restricted because of, say, fire safety reasons. And you're also asking the operators to become self-financed. I know that many of them can't achieve that. So if they run into difficulties and they have to, say, change their operation, so will the government provide support to these operators? Secretary, I thank Mr. Allowance for your suggestion. We have to be prudent in spending public money. It cannot be taken forward lightly. Going by experience, whether the amount is sufficient. Sorry, I would defer to the Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, the member, for your question. In paragraph 11, we mentioned about the details of the financial assistance for maintenance scheme on built heritage. A review was conducted several years ago, and starting 2016, for successful application, the ceiling of the grant has been increased to $2 million, and the relevant private owners, when taking forward the maintenance work, can also make other applications. And going by the experience in the past few years, there is no problem with such a grant amount. And the private owners are also given enough flexibility to go ahead with the maintenance works. That's the situation for the scheme. While you said that there is no problem, you set the ceiling at $2 million.
Well, the issue is they have to divide it in phases, and there's quality issues. So construction costs and architectural submission procedure are very complex. So for these historic buildings, if you retain it at this level, it is insufficient. So I hope you could review this procedure. I said just now that we would review the situation, but it will not be a comprehensive review. I have to point out, when it is a private building, if we use public funds, we have to consider it carefully. We will have to examine the situation. But we will not necessarily conduct a large-scale review in the short term. Mr. Tony Jie, regarding heritage conservation, I support that. Especially, it has to be done in a sustainable manner, in a timely manner. So my understanding is that we, between 1996 and 2000, there was a territory-wide survey. We set a baseline. We set some criteria for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 buildings and monuments. So my concern is regarding the new additional items. We have 250 buildings that are awaiting the assessment. Chairman, when you assess buildings, on the last occasion, 20 years ago, we had a large-scale assessment. So, has the government revisited, because our assessment might be different over as time changes? So 20 years ago we might not deem it as worthy, but now it would be considered worthy to preserve it. So the additional items, what is the reason? Is it from public recommendation or government initiative? Or did the AAB take the initiative? If the public feels that it is a heritage item, they will make suggestions to AAB, and the AAB, after receiving such input, they will conduct an assessment. Commissioner will elaborate. So as Mr. Jay said, buildings prior to 1950, we had conducted a census, and some 8,800 buildings, and of them 1,444 have a high heritage value, and we conducted an assessment. The paper also lists that aside from these 1,444, from 2009, the public, if they feel there should be an assessment, they can also make a request to the AAB. So the public have submitted some 300 new items, and amongst the new items, those would include buildings from 1950 and 1960. So there is a mechanism to ensure that aside from the 1,400 buildings, the public can also make recommendations or invitations to the AAB regarding the more modern buildings. The AAB frontline staff have also been engaged, and we will be reporting back on the latest development. Well, the government, if you look at buildings built before 1950, or if you look at buildings built before 1960, some might need preservation. So in 20 years' time, people's perceptions might change. So the government needs to take an initiative. Otherwise, you will be criticized for missing out, and you are only aware of a situation when the building has been demolished and you lack initiative. Okay, you need to take note of that, Ms. Tanya Chan. I want to also cue in the second round. Well, the Central Wan Chai Bypass has commenced operation. If you look at the document, there was a policy declaration in 2007. That policy arose because we didn't have the Queen's Pier, so the government came up with a 100-word policy. So now today we have the Central Wan Chai Bypass, and the CE suddenly felt that she fought successfully for the Queen's Pier because in 2007 she visited the site all by herself. But what is the fate of Queen's Pier? In 2007-08 there was the first round of consultation. In 2009 Mrs. Carrie Lam ignored calls, and then there was consultation in the first quarter of 2010. There was a suggestion to relocate it to Pier 10. So Eddie Chu and I suggested that we should reprovision it inside, and we had more votes than the government's one first, second, and third proposal. And the government is now conducting analysis of 2016 survey results. So why is it so counterintuitive? Why do we want to have a memorial in Queen's Pier, but relocate to Queen's Pier to somewhere somewhere remote? I want to understand why. Another policy question I want to ask, I want to reserve for in the second round. The Murray, that is the ex-Murray building, is going to be rebuilt as a hotel. I'm not sure if the Secretary is aware. Murray building had a lot of beautiful trees, but because the deed of covenant wasn't written carefully, so all of the trees were felled except for one. And here we see trees being demolished. It is to facilitate development, so you can see how healthy the tree is. So do we need to fell all the trees before there can be development? So aside from built heritage, has the government considered landscape heritage? Why are we so primitive? When will we change our tune? Thank you, Chairman. The last question, it's not just a conservation consideration, it's also a town planning consideration. If you have a new planning initiative, you understand that we have some tree preservation, the landowner needs to cooperate, and of course sometimes it's controversial. When we want to conserve trees, should we conserve all of them or some of them? The consideration is actually very thorough and serious. In 2016, the government came up with 3 proposals, and the consultation results were very diverse. There were people who wanted to reprovision Queen's Pier, and they might not agree with the 3 recommendations. So, given the different complexities, the government is still considering what to do in the next phase, and that is the answer I have at this time. We don't have a specific plan. We know we need to continue our efforts. Because we had so many diverse opinions in 2016, we have to consider it very carefully. So we have 2 colleagues who want to speak in the second round, but Mr. Chan Jixun is actually first round. I received Mr. Eddie Ju's motion, so after our 2 colleagues have spoken, Mr. Chan Jixun is second round. So after the second round, we'll deal with the motion. Okay, Mr. Chan Jixun, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I want to follow up on the previous question. Revitalizing a partner program, when you gave funding, they had to provide a report, they had to explain the operations, the income, the audience figures, Daigun, PMQ. Do they need to provide quarterly reports? We've heard comments about PMQ. So you have to provide attendance figures, but then we don't just have to rely on, we cannot just rely on attendance. So you have to look at the tenancy. So when you outsource it, the government will not interfere with daily operations. So are they left to their own devices? Can they act independently? Thank you for the question. Regarding the 8 projects in Central, every 2 months we report to Central Western District Council their operations, attendance, are will they will have to report regularly on that. You mentioned Daigun and PMQ, so these are government partnership programs. So it's not our scheme event, but every year they have to provide progress reports. They have to submit audited accounting reports. So we will monitor them through these measures. Starting from May 2018, Daigun operated till end of year. The attendance figures are some 2 million. Regarding PMQs, they operated in 2014 until the end of last year. There have been 15 million visitors visiting PMQ. Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Ms. Tanya Chan. I will continue following up on the tree felling on, well, if I think you are asking me personally or your bureau. Well, if you are asking for specific details, I'll have to go back and check. So aside from the Anglican Church, Mount Butler, there is a piece of land related to that. We don't want to see these tree fellings occur again. So I need a specific response. So cultural heritage includes a diverse criteria. So, for example, we don't have a lot of sites like Maryknoll School. So what will the future be? Can we make some amendments? Do you wish the Commissioner to answer?
Thank you, Ms. Chen, for your question. On the grading of historic buildings, some members have also mentioned that we have 6 criteria which are familiar also to Ms. Tanya Chan. I won't repeat those. When we look at these criteria, we do not look at the historical significance of the buildings. We would look at the cultural value and collective memory significance, and all these will be factored into the AAB's rating exercise. We talk a lot about point, line, and plane approach that was mentioned by Carrie Lam when she was the Secretary for Development. What about the plane level? What are you doing about that, Commissioner? On the approach of line, point, line, and plane. In 2014, a policy review was conducted, and it was suggested the point, line, plane approach was adopted. On the plane level, we have some good examples. There are some 16 historic buildings in Tai Kwun, in Shaw Studio. That was also a good example of a plane approach. In the paper, we also said that in 2017, under the Build Heritage Conservation Fund, a new funding scheme was launched for thematic studies. In the first round, we've invited 8 academic institutes to study into the point, line, plane approach, and that started in Q3 of 2018. We look forward to the outcome of these studies, and then we will do conservation work based on the point, line, and plane approach. No, sorry. So all members have spoken, so we have to deal with Mr. Eddie G's motion. We don't have a quorum. We have to ring the bell for 5 minutes to ask members to return. For members upstairs, please come down immediately.
跟住係副秘書長助理秘書長嘅喎。陳福耀應該做到第3個啦，做唔上，做唔到第4個。好難講呢啲發展嘅堆填區。
但係都支持嘅喎，區議會又支持。
區議會支持同立法會兩回事。
有時佢哋區議會唔支持，佢哋就反應又大啲。
佢一個反對啊，佢區議會一個反對，全部都有反對。佢一夠人就可以投票㗎啦，唔使等陣。
都要等5分鐘，因為呢個係表決鐘嚟嘅，就並
唔係 call 林咩？
唔係 call 唔係 call。
有啲唔夠人係 call 林嘅應該。係咪想
Yes. I wonder whether we have a quorum. Anyway, we have to wait for 5 minutes. Anyway, let me read out the motion. The motion goes like this: in view of the fact that many graded historic buildings have been demolished, this panel urges the government to conduct a review and amend the Antiquities and Monuments Ordinance as soon as possible to afford statutory protection to the graded historic buildings. I'm not asking that all historic buildings be declared monuments, but we must amend historic buildings of different grade, different degree of protection. Say if it's a grade 3 building, then the exterior should be protected, but then for say a grade 1 building, more parts of it have to be protected. So I look forward to members' support. Mr. Edward Lau, you have to sit here. All right. Let's put this to the vote. Those who are in favor, please raise your hand. Ten are for. Those who are against, please raise your hand. No. Any abstention? Please raise your hand. 1. So the motion is passed. Okay, that's it for this item. Let's move on to the next item. Item 6 is the PW item number 716CL, Changquan Further Development. infrastructure works for Cheng Kwan O Stage 1 landfill site. The electrical paper is LC paper number CB bracket 1456/1819 bracket 07. So please take note of the paper. The administration team attending comprises PAS from Development Bureau, Mr. Victor Chan. And another one, Assistant Secretary Works Policies 2, Mr. Terence Chair. From the CEDD, we have the Project Manager East, Mr. Michael Leung, JP. And then from the CEDD, Chief Engineer, East 1, Mr. Sunny Low. So thank you for coming. So can the government representatives first walk us through the paper briefly? Thank you, Chairman and members. This paper briefs members on the proposal to upgrade the remainder of 716CL. According to the Cheng Kwan O ZP, the restored Cheng Kwan O Stage 1 landfill site, that is the area 77. It is planned for recreational purposes. To fulfill that purpose, the CEDD in 2005 completed the feasibility study for further development of Cheng Kwan O. We recommend different infrastructure facilities be put in for Area 77. In the first phase includes the pedestrian walkway and the cycling track, and also a bridge straddling the a certain tunnel were completed a few years ago. This time we are recommending the remaining of 716CL and connection of bridge connecting the southern part, and the construction of a sewage pumping station and along rising mains. The estimate is $316 million at money of the day prices. We plan to start the works and the second half of this year to be completed in 2020. We have consulted the Sao Kong District Council and the relevant subcommittees under it, and they support the works should commence as soon as possible. So can I now defer to the CEDD to introduce the project through PowerPoint? Please be very brief because we don't have much time. Thank you, Chairman and members. Infrastructure works for Cheng Kwan O Stage 1 landfill site. Cheng Kwan O further development comprises two parts. One is a footbridge with a length of about 150 meters, which is we would call the Southern Bridge, and then the construction of a sewage pumping station about 560 meter long rising mains. This is the location of the Southern Bridge. To the left, it connects the area 68. To the right, it connects area 77. We want to enhance the connectivity between these two areas so that we can tie in with the recreational users of area 77. This is the look of the artist's impression of proposed Southern Bridge. This is an arching bridge made of steel. It looks like a wave to tie in with the surrounding environment. We now have a Northern Bridge, and we are proposing for a Southern Bridge to be built. And further down, that photo is the Cross Bay Link. We have an arching design for the three bridges, and they work, best. And we hope that this can become unique characteristics of Cheng Kwan O. Apart from the Southern Bridge, we will also build a pumping station to collect sewage from the from that area, area 77. The pumping station will pump the sewage up to the Cheng Kwan O Wangpo Road trunk sewage for treatment. The sewage pumping station is at Lowers Park Road. The design is compatible with the surrounding environment, so that there is an integrated look. We would like to seek funding in the first half of 2019, commence works in second half of 2019 for completion of works in 2022. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Those who would like to speak, please press the button. This is a funding application, I'd like to remind members that in accordance with ROP 83A, if you have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matter being discussed, please disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. Each member will be given 4 minutes. The first one, Mr. Alvin Young. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Anything that involves bridge, well, gets us worried because there have been exorbitant costs involved in building of bridges in recent years. We are talking about $360 million covering 2 projects. What about the Southern Bridge alone? What is the cost? Thank you. The CDD has done an estimated cost for the Southern Bridge. It's around $200 million. This is a bridge for use by pedestrians only, not for bicycles. Are there similar projects which can be of reference to us? We talk about a 6-meter wide bridge. What is the cost of similar bridges so that we can assess whether this is costly or a reasonable estimate? In the estimates, the CADD has taken reference from similar projects, especially steel bridges. Can I ask the CADD to supplement? Yes, thank you. On the estimated amount, we understand the members' concern. So we have taken a look at the similar bridges, pedestrian bridges and steel bridges in Chengguan-o. In Tongming Street, bridges and Tongming Street have been taken as reference. So, Chairman, we don't have such information in our paper today. When you go to the PWSC, please provide the relevant information so that we can make comparisons more easily. So, PAS, please do that. With some time left, I would like to ask that when the government considers not allowing bicycles to use a bridge, is that the final proposal? Is there any room for a change? Because and the 2 sides of the bridge, there are cycling tracks. I understand that there isn't a bridge, but then it's further away. Is there any room for maneuver, for improvement, whereby you can allow bicycles to use it?
In Chengguan-o, we have a 5-kilometer cycle track. It covers Chengguan-o, the 2 promenades, and the North Bridge, and a link under construction. So it is roughly in the middle. So the design of the bridge is a static bridge, so we do not suggest the use of bicycles. So cyclists, between the North and South Bridge, it's only 400 meters, so they can use the existing cycle track. So this arrangement, we had consulted with the district council and they agree on this arrangement. I understand. Civic Party stance will await the subsequent documents and government statistics before making a decision. Mr. Tan Ji-chun. I understand the necessity of this bridge. I support building the bridge. The government had met with us and gave some explanations. I am concerned about the cost of the bridge. The paper figure of 301.6 million includes sewage. It doesn't have a breakdown. So I think when you get to the PWSC, there will be subheads. So the government said that the bridge is 200 million. I support Mr. Alvin Young. We need some reference documents and figures to see whether it is value for money. So, but it's very hard to compare with normal bridges. There are some design features. It is streamlined, but I'd still like the figures. The residents are want to know how high above the water level is the bridge. So during typhoon, the bridge won't be damaged, or because if you look at the artist's impression, it doesn't seem to be very much above the promenade. So during the Mangkhut typhoon, it was a strong typhoon. Can it stand super strong typhoons? Thank you for the question. Thank you for your support. Regarding the costs, in our paper to this PWSC, we will have the subheads and the costs is similar to similar projects. Regarding the height of the bridge, I'll defer to CEDD. Thank you, Chairman. The bridge height, especially during high tide or during typhoon, during the Typhoon Mangkhut, the wind speeds were 220 kilometers per hour. So in our design, we had considered extreme weather conditions. So previously, we had done a wind tunnel test. So it can withstand 360 kilometers per hour. So it's 50% more than the Typhoon Mangkhut speeds. This is just wind damage. What about, have you looked at the water level or sea level damage? Well, regarding high tide, we had looked at that as well. The bridge is higher than the sea levels during Typhoon Mangkhut. I'm not too familiar with the Cheongkwano area. I want to follow up on Mr. Chen Jixun's question regarding sea level. We were very fortunate during Typhoon Mangkhut. It wasn't a direct hit. It wasn't during high tide, and but the sea level description wasn't very accurate just now, because we see, if you look at the artist's impression, the bridge seems to be of a wooden material, and you see it's very streamlined. Of course, we need ventilation, but we also need protection against seawater. So, our experience from Typhoon Mangkhut on Hong Kong Island, the seawall, the waves can crash the seawall. You see Hang Fa, Chun, and Siu Sai Wan were affected, and we see the two ends of the bridge. Is it secure? And regarding the sewage facility, there is a proposed water sports center next to the sewage facility. So there are also some jogging tracks near the promenade. The Development Bureau, when they design promenades, you need to allow for joggers and cyclists. They need to have water fountains for refreshment. Thank you for the question. CEDD, in building bridges or ancillary facilities, they have to bear wind speed in mind, including strong typhoon, extreme weather. They had especially done a wind tunnel test indicating, as our director said, they can sustain 360 kilometer per hour winds, and compared to Mangkhut speeds of 220 kilometers, the safety factor is actually very high. I understand. In fact, my question is, if we have typhoon number 3, will the seawater flood the bridge? So we do have some small vessels using the Eastern Channel. So the vessels can travel under the southern bridge, and there is a clearance of some 7.6 meters that is sufficient. I also had a question about the material. Will it be slippery and so on? The bridge is a steel bridge. It makes the bridge light, so it can pass the wind tunnel test. There are some anti-slip material covering the bridge. Mr. Tony Jie? Well, in principle, we won't object to submitting the item to PWSC for scrutiny, for funding application. So I'm also concerned about the cost. If you compare that to the Northern Bridge, it's 140 meters, but it came in use since 2012. It could accommodate passengers. It could accommodate pedestrians and cyclists, and also emergency vehicles, and the cost was 150 million. And just now you said the price was 200 million. So as chairman, as the government pledged the need to provide the cost figures and reasoning why it is more expensive. So there is a landfill nearby. Does that affect the soil? The Northern Bridge is displaced, and there is some settling, and at the most severe case there is some settling of 8 centimeters. I'm not sure if you had foreseen this. Were you aware, and did you accommodate for settling? Do you have more information? Thank you for the question regarding costs. I had mentioned compared to other similar projects, the price is similar, and in the upcoming PWSC we will provide more detailed breakdown. Regarding the design, I'll defer to CEDD. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the geology and the soil, so we, in the Southern Bridge, we had done extra site formation work. We want to have a thorough investigation of the soil quality. Well, what about settlement of the Northern Bridge? I think there would the soil that should be of a similar nature. Has the Northern Bridge has it been displaced? We have all the information on hand, and we are incorporating that in the design of the Southern Bridge. Any question? Yes, they need to submit the figures. So if you divide it out, it's $1 million plus per meter. It's not the same as the Yunlong Bridge. That's different. The width is different. So it's getting more and more expensive. I understand that it's because of the geological nature of the landfill. So similarly in Yunlong, If you're building on top of a quarry site, it becomes more expensive. So we're talking about costs of $1 million plus per meter, not the whole bridge. So it is our responsibility to scrutinize these projects. So do you support this item? I said just now, in principle, I support the item, but we need more information. So let's extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Any objection to it? If not, so I don't hear any objections. They just want more information. So you can submit it to PWSC. So the government officials are in attendance. Let's invite them in. And agenda item 7, 3468 RO, improvement at Lamwa Street Playground and adjacent area. So paper CB bracket 1 456 1819 bracket 08. So government officials are arriving. We have Miss Brenda O, head of Energizing Kowloon East Office. Mr. Edwin Wong, deputy head of Energizing Kowloon East. Mrs. Doris Falk from the LCSD. ASD, Mr. Edward J. And also from ASD, Senior Project Manager 328, Miss Wendy Kwok. So welcome the government officials. We'd also like the government to take us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. We suggest to upgrade 3468RO, improvement of Lamwa Street Playground and adjacent area, to Category A. It includes PowerPoint Area A and construction site B. We suggest a new playground.
And in Site C, a pedestrian walkway will be facelifted, and enhancement of the streetscape near the playground and the green spine and the blue and gray area. This green spine is in T shape. It is a major green corridor in the district. From this PPT, we see that at sites A, B, C, and their present situation, the playground was built in 1989, and it featured passive recreational facilities. And there was a 5-a-side soccer pitch which does not meet present international standards. There are staircases leading to the playground, which is 2 to 3 meters high, and is undesirable. We propose to flat out the entire playground. We can keep the big trees to the east of the playground, and we can also enhance the connectivity, increase the area for use, and increase the greening ratio, provide new facilities and ancillary facilities. We will provision the 5-a-side soccer pitch for co-use as a handball court, and after that we believe there will be more uses. At sites B and C, at the sitting out area will be part of the green spine from north to south. It will provide a very good walking environment for people working in the area. And at site C, we will enhance the pedestrian walkway. This PPT shows the trees to be preserved within the garden. They are mainly to the east of the playground, and we will retain some trees, transplant some trees, and compensate some trees. This is their distribution. We have taken reference from the Kwun Tong Greening Master Plan to pick up the species of trees to be planted, and Bibio in patiginosa will be the main tree species to be planted. I would like to remind members this is a funding application in accordance with ROP 83A. If members have a direct pecuniary interest in the matters to be discussed, you should disclose the nature of that interest before he speaks. Two members would like to speak. 4 minutes each. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Thank you, Chairman. I have a quick question. I support this improvement project. You refer to the 5-a-side soccer pitch and the lawn. Have you considered swapping their positions? In other words, the lawn will be used as the football court, while the site for the football court will be used as a lawn. Why did I raise this? This is very much a project under the Energizing Kowloon East initiative. We want to enhance the accessibility of the pedestrians. So would the lawn be placed at the corner instead, so that it is at the junction of two streets, and then people passing by the main roads, they will they can see the lawn easily and walk into it. And for the soccer pitch, well, going by the picture, you should have it fenced off. So should it be moved towards the middle and put the lawn at the corner? And now the setting is that it is easier to Namfong and it is more accessible by the back streets, but it's a give and take here. Have you considered whether my suggestion is better? Going by your professional assessment, you may have your own views. Thank you, Mr. Tam, for your question. In determining the location of the facilities, our prime consideration is to maintain the trees in the area. So that's why the landscaping area now will be maintained. Oh, I understand it. Well, then you want to avoid felling the trees and keeping the setting as it is. Well, that I understand. Mr. Tony Chair? Enhancement and improvement of the playground. I would not object to this submitted to the PWSC. I have some questions. I believe that the present design has been set and you're just seeking funding for doing the works. My first question. Well, Energizing Kowloon East office is taking the lead in building a smart city. The CE wants Hong Kong to be turned into a livable and smart city. I see that Wi-Fi services are going to be provided, but on top of that, what other smart city initiatives would you have? What other facilities can realize the vision of a smart city? That's point number one. Number two, you have referred to sites A, B, C, and D. Why do you have to divide them up into different sites? Is it because you want different contractors to undertake different works in the different sites, or you would bundle all the sites together and let one contractor work on them? I hope that more SMEs can take part in small works projects. Third, when you go to PWSC, I hope that you can provide more information on the cost estimates for the different items. Much of the works has to do with greening and landscaping. I believe that you can have further breakdowns on the different items. What is the cost for the soccer pitch? And so on and so forth. Please provide more information. As for landscaping and greening, I believe that you have sought assistance from the professionals and experts in coming up with your landscape design. This is the project on playground. Apart from providing Wi-Fi spots, we would also be using smart meters, water meters. There will be green facilities. There will be solar-powered lamps and also photovoltaic facilities. And conserving energy and cutting down emission are features of a smart city. We want to have one contractor taking all the works because works at sites B and C are small in scale and are relatively simple, so we would not have different contractors taking on the works. But then there are different completion dates for different works. Works at sites B and C can be completed earlier. As for a detailed breakdown on the cost estimates, we will include them in the BWSE paper. Chairman, since we are talking about different sites A, B, C, and D, well, please list out the cost for the different sites. And also please have a breakdown on the cost for the landscaping and greening works. On smart city initiatives, apart from environmental protection or energy saving facilities, would you be considering doing more on, say, the rubbish bins, the lamps, and incorporate green features in those? You're supposed to take the lead in such initiatives in the use of a smart and advanced technology. Well, the smart lampposts would first be implemented in the colonies, is that right? Well, for the IGCIO, we'll be putting up 100 lampposts in Kowloon East, and some of them will be in Shangyut Road, which falls within the areas of our works. And for recyclers, rubbish recyclers, we are now working on the concept accreditation. And when the concept is mature, we will share experience with the EPD and assess how new technologies can be adopted for collecting and separating waste. Ms. Tanya Chan. Now, after you have spoken, I think it's just time. Well, I'll be mindful about the time. I'll try to be succinct. In the concept plan for C, it seems that there are no benches. It seems that people can walk to site A to sit down. Is there a need for benches there? And then for site A, there is a 5-a-side soccer pitch and tilers. Do you have water fountains or water dispensers? And for the fitness corner, I see that there is only a flat piece of land there. Have you considered what uses will be made of it? And will there be special design for the floor so that people can actually do exercises there? Ms. Au. On site C, it is now a pedestrian walkway, basically. After the enhancement, while we don't provide seats, the design is such that people can sit right next to the trees. So that's becomes a part of the design. It's good. It's a shaded area. There will be water dispensers. 2 sets, 4 water dispensers will be there. And why? For the fitness corner is a flat piece of ground. We hope that it can be enjoyed by both the able and the disabled bodies. Do you have any equipment? I think there isn't much design there, so I would like to know whether the floor is suitable for people to exercise there, and no equipment is planned. Do you would you be putting in certain equipment? Yes, there will be certain equipment to be installed in the fitness corner. We will opt for the more popular equipment. So all members have asked their questions. I have one comment, since we still have some time, because after 6:15 we can't vote. Well, maybe let me deal with this first, and before you speak, many members have not opposed to the project, so the item can be forwarded to the PWSC. Mr. Attorney Chair would like to say something. Talking about a smart initiative, maybe you are already doing it. There are some trees to be retained, and very often QR codes are used whereby people can scan the QR codes and for further information, educational materials on the trees. Can this be done? You have a register of trees, and if it is digitalized, then what my suggestion can be implemented. Well, give more opportunities to the young people so that they can come up with novel ideas. Please consider this more. Let's not just stick to the old rules in doing things. Let's have some innovation. That's the point that I would like to make. Any response on trees? Several universities and Friends of the Earth are conducting a study. One of the projects is that they will look at the inclination degree of the trees to assess whether they are dangerous. So that study has just started. So that's it for this item. Item 8, AOB. Any AOB? If not, thank you for your cooperation. Thank you.